Wacky reviews the biggest douche in the universe! Coming this Friday to all Rowdy C Patreon supporters! Huh! Never expected to see you again. You've put on weight. You're not exactly the poster child for Slim for Life yourself. You've still got that charm of yours. How do you still have this job with that type of attitude? Oh, you have no idea how many of our managers and supervisors think exactly the same as us. Remember, they promote up in our industry. One day, we're all gonna rise together as one coalition and wreak total vengeance on everyone who looks upon our industry with crap. And when exactly is that gonna be again? Well, we all pool 1% of our tips together into a slush fund. So, in about another 200 years, you people will all be sorry. I'll prepare for the upcoming apocalypse. TV trash. There is no doubt that Tex Avery is an absolute legend when it comes to animation. Many of the tropes and gags we associate with cartoons can be attributed to Frederick Bean Avery, who firmly believed in the idea that cartoons could and should do anything. The result was a massive collection of Golden Age cartoons from multiple studios that remain beloved to this day. Avery was instrumental in the creation of characters like Daffy Duck, Bugs Bunny, Droopy, Screwy Squirrel, and others, and left standards for animated comedy that almost all cartoon creators still look up to. Which is why the animators at DiC decided to pay tribute to the man with a new animated series in the late 90s. And by tribute, I mean something that probably had the guy spinning in his grave so many times, it's making a cartoon whirling sound. At first I thought this show actually aired on Cartoon Network, which would have made things even worse, all things considered. But no, this was actually a syndicated show. I'll get into the details of that later on, but for now, I know a lot of you have been waiting a long time for this one, so let's finally get into the wacky world of Tex Avery.
Welcome to the wacky wack wack wacky wacky wack wack. Welcome to the wacky world of Tex Avery. Welcome to the wacky wack wack. Welcome to the wack wack wacky wacky world.
Hey everyone! You ever wanted to see what the Animaniacs theme would be like if there was no effort whatsoever? Well, here you go! Yeah, let's just spend nearly a minute saying the same words over and over again, mixed in with a bunch of bodily function noises. That's gonna get people to want to watch this thing. And yes, they did put their best foot forward because things aren't getting any better after this. So as you can probably guess, the show is made up of a series of animated shorts, airing 3 in each half-hour episode. And most of the shows are anchored by a short involving Tex Avery. Yes, they actually created a character named after Tex, a cowboy that seriously needs to consider decaf. Yet in real life, Frederick Avery was a very quiet and reserved man, and one who never actively sought out the spotlight, which is one reason why he sadly did not get a lot of recognition for his work until after his death. This Tex Avery is some kind of hybrid character where his design was inspired by the one-shot Bugs Bunny foil Red Hot Rider, who was actually the creation of Bob Clampett. And he's in all these scenarios reminiscent of Droopy cartoons, only his personality is more akin to Bugs or Screwy Squirrel, with none of their charm and just being annoying. He's having to battle this desperado called Sagebrush Sid to try and win the affections of Miss Chastity Knott.
What kind of stupid name is that?
And it's like they truly looked at every single thing that made those aforementioned cartoons enjoyable and thought, just how much crap can we smear on them? I mean, just take a look at this exchange.
Hand over the gold, Tex, or I'll blast you with these Colt Thunder shots.
And I'll blast you with this pump-action Winchester crater maker.
Huh? Not while I'm holding a rapid-action Gatlin Swiss Caesar.
This isn't even explaining the joke. This is talking the joke to death. This classic gag never needed expository dialogue because the visuals of the larger and larger weapons were enough to carry the joke. When you add in all this pointless jibber-jabber, it makes the whole thing come off as an insulting parody to the original joke, not an homage to it. Oh, good God, this is like the Scooby-Doo movie of animated shorts. But don't worry, I'm not going to torment you by looking at all of the Tex shorts. Oh no, we've got all the other cartoon garbage this show produced to sit through. The first of the other shorts we get is Pompeii Pete, which is supposedly about a Roman soldier that was sealed up in lava when Vesuvius blew and has now been freed and brought back to life in present day. Yeah, it's an Encino Man ripoff, and yet somehow this thing might actually come off as more annoying than Pauly Shore. And the cartoon opens not with the title character, but this deadbeat named Dan, I think. I don't think they ever give his name, at least in this short. Who fakes an injury to get free room and board at the hospital. They seriously spend the first 2 minutes of a 6-minute long cartoon showing this guy looking to mooch off of the hospital, where it turns out Pete is an orderly. Hey, let's punish a deadbeat by giving him valid reason to sue for malpractice. This guy probably has Lionel Hutz on retainer for crimini's sake. And then if you didn't get your fill of bad anachronism humor, we then get Einstone, which is about a supposed genius inventor in the Stone Age. Basically, every single short is about the title character trying to create some new invention and his friends getting constantly beaten to death with them. That's pretty much the joke, repeated multiple times in every single cartoon.
Well, one more shot ought to do it.
Okay, who's my next volunteer? Hey, what the?
Am I sure I'm not watching the pilot for Seth MacFarlane's reboot of the Flintstones? Then there's Genghis and Connie, in which this lion plays an XP of Genghis Khan, and his attempts to conquer the world are constantly being thwarted by this annoying little pissant of a panda bear that always shows up in whichever land he's planning to pillage, including Scotland and the Virgin Islands.
I must avenge my family against the evil ninja. Hi-ya! Ha! Take that! And that! I win!
Look on the bright side, it only took another 20 years for DreamWorks to do that concept right.
Ooh, the big bad pussycat wants to play rough.
And there's another one where Genghis tries to launch a nuke at Connie's castle and it backfires and he gets launched into a satellite? Or when he tries to smuggle himself into Greece with a Trojan Statue of Liberty? I don't get it. I really don't get it, and I'm a fan of anachronistic comedy. Seriously, watch this to see how it's done right. We also get Power Pooch, which is supposed to be a stand-in for Underdog, another character Tex Avery didn't create. And his nemesis is Dr. Hydrant, which I guess is funny that a fire hydrant has vowed revenge against dogs or something, but then here we get these type of jokes.
The Fiend! He's replaced the stairway with an exact duplicate city filled with millions of robot citizens! I wonder how robot hot dogs taste.
How do you manage to make Pith Possum look like a competent superhero? Oh, and he has another foe named Bad Cat, who is a flat-out ripoff of Schnookums. You know, when Quest for Camelot ripped off Belle's design, at least they were copying a good animated character. Most of the other cartoons are almost all the same, using the old cliche of insane, troublemaking character making life hell for some stuck-up person. But the problem with many of them is we don't get a lot of reason to want to see the foil get the abuse they're subjected to. One of the few where you could possibly justify it is Dan from the Pompeii Pete shorts. And that doesn't work because not only is Dan shown far more often than Pete in those shorts, but Pete is never shown actually trying to bring retribution on Dan. He's just a clueless dolt who's always in the wrong place at the wrong time for Dan. So the setup is wasted. And it doesn't help that Pete can't even talk English while speaking in a bad Italian accent, almost worse than that one they've slapped Mario with in recent years. Mario will always be from Brooklyn and you will never convince me otherwise! Other reviewers like the Nostalgia Critic, Bennett the Sage, and Confused Matthew have talked about how difficult it is to review bad comedy, because comedy can be very subjective, and there just are only so many ways you can say that's not funny anyway. But there are definitely some points I can bring up in general regarding these things. First off, the pacing of these shorts is terrible. It's really hard to describe, but everything just seems to progress at a snail's pace compared to what you're used to seeing in one of these shorts. Which tells me they needed to stretch out the animation to get the story to cover the full 7 minutes, because they couldn't write enough material even with the multiple writers. Yeah, almost every short had around 3 writers credited. I remember seeing the same trend in many of the bad SpongeBob episodes that Enter has reviewed, and that's one thing that really peeves me as a writer myself. I've seen countless half-hour cartoons that were written by just one person. Heck, at one point, David Wise was writing whole seasons of the first Ninja Turtles cartoon. Why do you need 3 people to pen one 7-minute short? It's like Exhibit A of Too Many Cooks Spoil the Soup. Also, there's almost no music, and what is there is barely audible at times. The music was key to setting up the situation in a lot of Golden Age cartoons, not just Avery's. And in fact, I'd say that not giving the music the needed attention is a big thing wrong with a lot of cartoons in more recent years. Stuff like that and the jokes that fall flat would be bad enough, but it only makes it worse when you know that this is all supposed to be some kind of tribute to perhaps the greatest animator who ever lived. Like I said, the show was produced by Deke under the creation of longtime Deke and Filmation writer Robbie London, and aired in syndication mostly on Fox stations from what I can tell. The problem was that they couldn't use any of the actual characters that Avery created, since almost all of them are now owned by Time Warner. Which probably didn't help that Deke was technically a Disney subsidiary at this time. In fact, Warner was already airing their own tribute to the man with the Tex Avery show on Cartoon Network, which just re-aired all the old Avery cartoons and was all that was necessary. I can't understand why someone would want to create new cartoons featuring Avery's most well-known creations, but given how many times trying to update classic cartoons has failed, I'm actually impressed that Warner showed restraint in this case. So here they pretty much create all these new characters that I guess are supposed to suggest what Avery would likely create in present day, but they don't get that the old cartoons were more than just everyone acting like they're on way too many amphetamines. Like, they remember all the classic gags that are associated with Tex's work, but they completely screw up the context that made the bits work in the originals. For example, Tex the Cowboy is shown making all the hot-to-trot horn dog looks toward chastity that we mainly associate with characters like the wolf in the famous Red Hot Riding Hood short. But remember, the wolf was the villain of that short and presented as a lecherous monster and thus someone we wanted to see get comeuppance in the end. Instead, we're supposed to want to see Tex beating up Sid in the end to try and win Chastity's affection, and then I guess supposed to feel sorry when it turns out that Chastity is a tramp that was playing both of them before riding out with someone else altogether.
Whammon! Go figure.
How is it that the 1940 short is the one that presents the woman in a better light? What's even sadder is just how much talent was wasted here. The Tex character and Sid were both voiced by Billy West. Freaking Maurice LaMarche did a ton of narration on the show. And we also had the likes of Cree Summer and Scott McNeil voicing a number of characters. There was supposedly a blog post somewhere that's since been taken down talking about how much the animators hated working on the show, and it said the only reason they were able to get the rights to use Tex's name at all is because his daughter needed the money to send her kids to college. That's probably the saddest thing of all, that one of the pioneers of animation made so little in his life that his family now needed to sell off his name just to get by. And with that, they were actually able to churn out a full 65 episode season. That's a total of 105 animated shorts that I can only think of one way to sum them up with.
Welcome to the Wacky Wack Wack Wacky 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 World. The Wacky World of Tex Avery. Tex Avery.
You know what? This cartoon sucks. I gotta be honest here. This was one of the most difficult reviews I've had to make because the show is clearly bad, but it's really hard to put into words just why it's bad. It's like you really have to watch the cartoons themselves to just see how horribly slow, dull, and unfunny they actually are. But then you're only going to regret watching them in the first place. With them doing stuff like this by the late 90s, it's no wonder Deke was on its last legs by then. Andy Hayward did purchase the studio back from Disney in 2000, but the company didn't produce much afterwards that's really been remembered before they were bought up by Cookie Jar Entertainment 8 years later. Meanwhile, if you're looking for an actual tribute to Tex Avery's work, just dig up the actual Tex Avery cartoon shorts themselves. Maybe watching them online enough will get Time Warner to put the Tex Avery show back on the air. But I probably doubt it. It's definitely a case of how sometimes it just isn't possible to duplicate the greatness of old classic animation and television. But remember, that doesn't mean everything that's old was good. And we'll be getting back into that next month on TV Trash. Next time on the Wrestling Mark Show, Rowdy reviews Brawl for All. Join Rowdy's Patreon to get the video now. Will be available on rowdyc.com and Manic Expression next Monday.